Our focus in this panel is going to be this question of this newfound enthusiasm for community colleges and technical colleges and the role that they can play potentially in addressing the skills gap and making sure that people coming into the workforce are ready and with the skills and aptitudes ready to take the jobs that are out there. Cheryl, just give us a bit of background about yourself and how you've come to be thinking about these questions from your seat as Chancellor of Chicago's community colleges.
Okay, I'll give you a bit of background about me and how I became Chancellor, which I think is quite interesting. I come from the corporate sector. I've been Chancellor almost 5 years. April will be 5 years. I come from the utility industry. I was a vice president for Commonwealth Edison, which is a subsidiary of Exelon, which is one of the largest utilities. And I was asked by then Mayor Daley to come and lead the City Colleges of Chicago for several reasons. One, I was leading a huge turnaround initiative at the utility, which was proven to be quite successful. And I think one thing that people have to keep in mind is change affects people the same way, whether it's a utility or whether it's education. It typically affects people the same way. But two, I'm a graduate of City Colleges of Chicago. And so I grew up in the system and knowing the system. So that's how I became to be Chancellor. And my goal is to, 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, I launched what's called the reinvention of City Colleges of Chicago. And why was it necessary? For several reasons. One, we do have a large skills gap and information gap, which I think community colleges are uniquely positioned to help close. And we just were not doing that. When I became Chancellor, the completion rate was 7%. And we have 115,000 students, which was unacceptable. And so thousands of jobs in our region were going unfilled. And so we've launched a reinvention of city colleges. We've launched a college to careers, which I'll talk about later. And through that, we've managed to build 150 corporate partners who are now helping us turn that around. And our graduation rate has doubled.
Great. Joerg, just tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing in this area.
Well, MTU is an advanced engine manufacturer. We are based in Aiken, South Carolina. We are building basically everything that doesn't run on a road. We serve markets like Navy, Coast Guard, rail, mine haul trucks. The engines have up to 10,000 horsepower. We are part of Rolls-Royce Power Systems, which is headquartered in Friedrichshafen, Germany. We have worldwide about 10,000 people. And overall, we belong to the Rolls-Royce group, which is headed from Great Britain.
So you are doing work in terms of taking the German model, which everyone around the world now focuses on, as this apprenticeship, this ability to somehow produce very, very accomplished engineers and so forth. I mean, what is it about the German model that you think makes it so good, and how can it translate to the American context?
Well, the way the challenge came to us was we have in Aiken about 150 hourly employees. And at the beginning, we had no problems to recruit people that had diesel manufacturer skills. But over time, the pipeline was drained out. And we asked ourselves the question, could it be possible that the system that works for us in Germany could be transferred to the US? Can 16, 17-year-old kids that work in Germany not also work in the US? And we reached out to the school district and found a location. It's called a career center. It's basically a workshop of 5 high schools where the director was very open to the approach. So what we did, we changed what he had already, the curriculum slightly, and we were starting the program. We are now in the 3rd year. The program is currently at a stage where we hire every year 6 new students, 11th grader. They are in the program, 11th and 12th grade. They spend about 1,000 hours in our plant. They get trained, they get paid. At the end, they get a certificate certified by the state of South Carolina, also recognized by the Department of Labor, and to ice the cake, it's also recognized by Germany. So they could essentially, with their certificate, go back to Germany and start working as an apprentice over there. The program so far is very successful. It does what actually is supposed to do. At the end of high school, the students not only have a high school degree, they only have also the skills certificate, and then they can choose. They can choose to join a company, they can choose to go to college, they can choose to go in another state. And the two that made it to the finish line did exactly that. Both got an offer from the company, one joined the company, and the other one decided to go to college.
Now, do you think this is scalable? I mean, could you do this on a much larger scale? Could other companies be adopting?
Definitely. The program, that's an important aspect. The program is not tailored towards our needs. The program is tailored towards a certain standard. We call it industrial mechanic, which means every company that has an assembly line of any kind, that does machining of any kind, could use this skill. And the good part of this program is that we actually brought it into the community. So we basically are enhancing the education of the community, and no other company needs to come to us and take the apprentices away when they have graduated. They can join the program and choose and pick their own apprentices. So they will have the same basic training on this campus, and when they go out to the company to work for the company, they already get tailored towards the needs of the company. And after 2 years of training and 1,000 hours in the plants, the employer and the student can decide if they want to have a common future, or if they say, no, enough is enough, we don't want to work together. This is way more better than hire somebody and figure out within half an hour if this person fits the culture of the company or not. We know this person already for 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, Cheryl, just talk us through a bit about what the problems were when you came, and how you then thought about the strategy for turning the college around.
Right. So there, as I mentioned, one was the completion rate. So many students were not completing.
And why was that?
Well, there was a lack, I think, of focus on what the true mission and outcome should be. To me, there had to be true outcomes, true quantifiable goals. Without those, then you're not working towards anything, and 7% becomes acceptable. I think also traditionally, community colleges have been built around everyone having affordable, accessible education, and I totally agree with that. But you must couple access with success, and you must have quantifiable goals around it. And so that's what we've done. We recently launched a 5-year...
Quantifiable goals being...
Completion, employability, completion, retention, and not only employability, but employability with living sustainable family wages. And that's part of what we've been focused on. But the main program that we've implemented is called College to Careers. The first goal of reinvention, which there are 4 goals, is to ensure that every credential is relevant at city colleges, meaning that it has value to the 4-year institutions and it can transfer, or it has value in the workplace and they can hit the ground running day one in the workforce. And so what we did was an 18-month study to study the fastest growing sectors in our region over the next decade, and we found that there would be 7. We have 7 community colleges, and we aligned each one of the colleges with each one of those sectors: healthcare, advanced manufacturing, business, IT, culinary, hospitality, education, and human resources, and transportation, distribution, and logistics. Once we knew what those sectors were, we then brought in employers that represented each one of those sectors to validate our data, and then work alongside us and our faculty to determine what were we going to teach and how could we help them fill not only the skills gap, but the information gap. Many students don't know what's available to them. They don't know that it's a 500,000 jobs that's coming to our region over the next decade. And so those employers, which now it's 150 employers and 4-year institutions, now serve as advisors to all 7 colleges. And it's not just for us to become the short order cook where we're working with one hospital to say, hey, you have 10 positions, we're gonna fill that 10, but to say, we need you to help us help our programs become relevant to an industry so when they graduate, they can go to any Hospital. Once we did that, we then created what we call stackable credentials. Being such a large urban institution, we serve a very diverse population. So some of our students don't have 2 years before they need to work, and there's a lot of good paying careers and jobs that don't take 2 years. However, we didn't want them to just be stuck in any one job. We wanted every credential to stack on top of each other and be meaningful. So these stackable credentials that go anywhere from 3 months training to 2 years to 4 years all stack on top of each other and allow multiple points of exit and entry for our students. Today, Mary Manuel and I launched a program 3 years ago. We've had over 1,200 students who've gotten jobs just in those areas. The employers continue to work with us. The reviews are ongoing because we know everything is global. The market changes very quick. And so this must be an ongoing process.
Yeah,
that
talk
review
a bit
has continued.
more about, I mean, how you found this process of getting intelligence from the corporate sector as to what their needs are, because that seems to me to have been one of the big problems, is that there was no communication from the employers to the colleges. And
there was no communication because, again, I don't think the necessarily focus was aligning your credentials with the workforce. And so that left a big gap of communication. Once we decided to do that and we knew, okay, healthcare was a growing sector. One of our schools is positioned right in the heart of the medical district in Chicago. It was not hard to get conversations going with those employers. They were very happy that we finally started to do it. In many cases, once they heard we were doing this, they reached out to us. And then, of course, if Mary Manuel is your boss, it's not too hard to get companies to talk to you. That helped a lot. So, I mean, once we launched this, we just reached out to the companies that represented those sectors, and they were more than happy to come and help. Companies need a skilled workforce. They want to hear from the colleges. They want this type of process to happen. And so it's not very hard to get those conversations going.
And were they willing to get into course design issues and those
Exactly.
sorts of things?
Yes, they were very much willing to get in that, very happy to get into that. As a matter of fact, surprisingly, our faculty were not resistant to it. They now work together with our faculty to help design the course structure, to help design what's taught, and also to help embed those things that may not necessarily be taught in a book, like the soft skills that are extremely important. We have companies helping us with that. So they're very much involved in the curriculum design as well.
Now, Joerg, I mean, what's been the biggest challenge for you in bringing this German apprenticeship concept over to the United States?
Well, I would say the biggest challenge was to overcome the paradigms that are in the heads, such that how can you bring 16, 17-year-old in the plant? This is impossible because they need to be insured. They cannot work by themselves. So we checked all that, and we figured out they were actually double insured, because as long as they are in a recognized apprenticeship program, they were insured by the school and they were insured by the company itself. Second, to convince the parents, because so far manufacturing was dark, dirty, and dangerous. So what we did, we made a plant tour, and this didn't actually convince the students, but it convinced the parents, because you can imagine when you stand in front of an engine that has 5,000 horsepower and you start up the engine and run it up to rate it, the eyes of the fathers were glowing, and one father said, if I would have had this opportunity, I would have picked it right away. So it takes a lot of overcome old habits. It went back to the point that the name apprenticeship already has some meaning to it, where everybody says, well, this means unions. I said, well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't matter if a company is unionized or not unionized. An apprenticeship program is actually a program for young adults. Also, apprentice here in the US means adult apprentices. So I've seen apprentices in about 35, 40 years old. When we talk about apprentice in our sense, we mean students that still go to high school. We purposely were using high school students because what we would like to avoid is to reduce the dropout rate. Because there are students that when they enter 9th grade and realize that they cannot afford to go to college or they do not want to go to college, they just drop out and try to find a job and make some money. But if we can say, be careful, there might be something out there which can help you to have a start in a career that is below the college level, which means this is a starting point, it's not the end point. So this is a different starting point, but if you take this program, if you join the company, maybe in 2 or 4 years from now, you realize that you want to become a technician or you actually want to become a PhD or whatsoever else. Companies like ours have a tuition reimbursement program, so we actually help our employee to go to college. So we create another source for the colleges and for the universities. People that might have never wanted to go to college or could not have afford to go to college can now go to a college because they have a different start into their career. Others that go to the program remain an hourly worker for the rest of their life because they just love to put an engine together and go home every night and say, I have today contributed to an engine that costs $200,000, and they feel good about it. So it just opens more opportunities than we had before.
Now, Cheryl, you've doubled the completion rate so far. What do you think is reasonable to expect over the next 5 years, and what's your biggest challenge as you try and double it again, maybe, or whatever?
So my 5-year plan lays out that I have a goal that in 2018 will be at 20%. Right now we're at 14, so we're ahead, we're outpacing ourselves. And so, as you can imagine, there's a lot of pressure on my staff to say if we can outpace ourselves at this, we can do better than 20% in 2018.
I mean, 20% still seems low.
It does, but when you're coming from 7%
Right.
in a 5-year period, it's really fast. And so 20% actually put us where our peers are, but it does not put us where the best performing community colleges are, and that's my real goal.
And so what are they doing that you're not able to do?
So I think everything that they're doing, we're starting to do now. That's why you see the pace moving. We've learned so much from others who've had to tackle some of the same issues that we've had to tackle, but we've also started to implement something new. And one of the biggest issues, you asked me what were the issues, is just retention. How do you retain students so that they get through the system in a timely manner with credentials that are relevant? And that's one of the biggest issues we had, was retention. And so we've implemented, along with College to Careers, what we call our student GPS system. And so this is basically pathways, taking all of our programs, putting them in semester by semester pathways. We're going to start implementing block scheduling. So now you are on a path. You're no longer wandering through the system, taking courses that don't matter. And then with the block scheduling, we're allowing students to choose blocks of times that's suitable for them. So now you have your path that's offered at a time that's convenient for you, along with all the other student supports, which are very important. We have wellness centers in all our schools to help address some of the issues that students are struggling with outside of the classroom, which very much become a distraction. We have career advisement now. So we've put in a lot of student supports. We've put in pathways. We've got the relevant programs, but most importantly, we've set goals for ourselves that we are all holding ourselves accountable to.
Great. Well, in a second, I'm going to go to the audience for questions, but I just wanted to ask one more question to each of you about, I guess, the K through 12 system. And obviously, you're talking to high school students and things, but how close to K should we be getting in terms of trying to sync the education system up to the jobs market, and particularly the skills gap?
I think as close as you can, as fast as you can. The earlier you can get to students and inform them of their choices and introduce them to college to try to ensure they're college ready, the better prepared they are. I think it's no secret that one of the biggest struggles with community colleges is the issue of remediation. And that's a huge issue for us. Fortunately, Mary Manual is working very hard with both hard with both me and the CEO of our K through 12 system to make sure we have an integrated system. And so we have really expanded our dual credit, dual enrollment. We now have 3,100 students who can take free college courses while they're in high school. And so we're trying to align our career and technical education programs. And so it's very important to integrate the community colleges with the K through 12 system so that it's a seamless process and students are getting exposure as early as possible.
Joerg?
Yeah, I agree with Cheryl. So we actually go down to the 9th grade, which is the start into high school. And what we did this year for the first time, we approached a group of people that usually are not manufacturing worker, which is ladies. So we called it a Girls' Day and reached out to the high schools, and we were anticipating 20 to 30 girls. At the end, we had 90. We were introducing the plant. We were showing and telling them that although we are manufacturing, there are a lot of jobs that they could do as well. And it was a very interesting undertaking. So we have a stack plan, which basically is 9th grade, we introduce it to the school. 10th grade is when they see the Career Center for the first time. At the end of 10th grade, we go through the selection process of the students. We do the interview process, the math test. We do the plant tour with the parents and the students. And then we select the 6 that we will take and 6 that are right behind. And at any given time, we have 12 students in the program, 6th, 11th, and 6th, 12th grader.
Great. Well, comments, questions from the audience? Yep, over on the left. Do please say who you are and where you're from.
Hi, I'm Xiaoyi from Beijing Foreign Studies University. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Joerg. So both of you are saying that you are developing courses according to, competency-based courses or training according to the requirement of certain industries. And I did notice that, Cheryl, you are having like advanced mechanics. So my question is, so is it possible that the design of the courses is geared to a same industry, is integrated on a certain basis? And if that integration is possible, then would that integrated course be restricted by regions? Like what is offered in Chicago, will that be offered within the whole United States? And what Joerg is offered in the US, is it possible to be offered to students in China?
Yes, that is a very good question, and thanks for asking that. When we did our 18-month review, once we figured out what was relevant in our region, we then compared that to what was relevant nationally. As much as we want to make sure our students are prepared to take the jobs that are available in our region, we also know that students are mobile, they're global, especially with an industry like healthcare. And so we have created quite a bit of exchange programs. We have an exchange program with the Shanghai Health Institute in our health program, where we sponsor students from Shanghai, and now we're getting to the point where some of our students will be going there. And so our first goal was to figure out what we needed to do to properly serve our region. And now we are expanding that to figure out what we do globally. But most of our programs are somewhat reflective of that, particularly in healthcare and manufacturing and transportation, distribution, and logistics, where most of it is kind of the same. And so we're starting to pick up more global partners as well. But that's a very good question and something everybody should be mindful of. Thank you.
And if I could answer real quick, because a very important point, it shows the dilemma, on the other hand, that we are in. Mm-hmm. Because the dilemma in the US is currently that the program that we are in and that Siemens is in, all these programs we have in South Carolina, 600 companies that have apprenticeship programs of some form or fashion, they are not linked to each other. Mm-hmm. The system is very fragmented. So the answer is what Cheryl said, yes, it can be replicated everywhere in the world, but in order to do that, there need to be certain competencies, certain standards that are recognized overall, because then somebody in Beijing knows, if they are trained by us, what they have learned and what the certificate actually means.
So what could you do to integrate those apprenticeship schemes better? I mean,
well, we basically need to align the industry and basically government needs to align and say, okay, what are certain skills, what are competencies that are needed, that are the baseline. It's almost like the core of the tree.
So in Germany they would be aligned?
Yeah, in Germany they are aligned. The body is the chamber. In Germany it's the Chamber of Commerce that we have about 350 skills in Germany there where we have vocational training. So the chamber is basically covers it and reaches out to the companies and tweaks it as these skills are developing. This is the missing piece over here. So as long as there's no standardization, it's always this fragmented system. And if my apprentices couldn't go to the West Coast and work for a company because they wouldn't understand, the credentials are not transferable over there.
Do we have a last question from the audience? Okay, well, I will finish as time is pretty much upon us. I would love for each of you to say to our audience, you know, if there's one thing, if you're in an institution of higher education, that you should do, and if there's one thing that as an employer you could do that would, you know, help better integrate the education system with the job market for skilled jobs. One challenge to the university people and college people, one challenge to the employer. Cheryl.
So I think our college to careers model is a great model, but I think before you get there, there needs to be a huge cultural shift. I mean, it was very shocking to me that I spent maybe the first year of reinvention just sort of debating that our purpose should be training individuals for the workforce. That is a huge debate that's still taking place, at least I know, amongst community colleges, and setting measurable goals. One of the pushbacks I got when I came is that, you know, you can't run this like a business. Certainly you can. Community colleges are in the business of educating people, and it must be seen as that. And so I think there just needs to be a conversation, there needs to be a cultural shift, and everyone needs to understand who they are there to service and what the outcome should be.
Joerg?
I would say it needs to be a collaborative approach between industry and education. Industry needs to understand that they have a responsibility when it comes to education. And it's not just throwing the requirements over the fence and say, colleges here, do what you need to do. It needs to be really working together from the very beginning. So a transitioning of the students between the academic education and the industry going back and forth helps the student to understand better what they are learning for and the industry to better know what the students are capable of.